Juma didn't know that this evening would turn into such chaos. He was just a gardener, a poor young man from the village, working hard to support his family. But somehow, that night in Nairobi's fancy Rosanna Hotel, he became the center of a fight among three of the richest women in the city. Juma had met these women in different ways over the past few months. First, he worked at the mansion of Miriam, the wife of a powerful telecom businessman. Miriam was wealthy, beautiful, and used to having people admire her. But when she noticed Juma, something changed. He was quiet, polite, and very humble, so different from the men around her. She liked how he looked at her without fear or expectation, and she started to get interested in him. For Juma, she was just another boss, but he couldn't deny her kindness. Sometimes she would stay in the garden longer than necessary, asking him about his life and laughing at his jokes. Then came Zara. Zara was the wife of a famous media mogul, a woman who loved being the center of attention. She was strong-willed and never backed down from a challenge. When she noticed that Miriam had taken a liking to Juma, she decided she wanted him too, not because she needed him, but because she enjoyed the idea of winning over Miriam. Zara would give Juma little gifts, fancy coffee, chocolates, even a new shirt, and wink as she passed him. She loved the thrill of seeing him look surprised and a bit nervous. Lastly, there was Amina, the soft-spoken wife of a famous architect. Amina was different. She didn't need to win over anyone. Her life was already set in luxury and calm. But in Juma, she saw something refreshing. He reminded her of simpler times, a time when life wasn't all about high society parties and endless formalities. One day, she invited Juma for tea. At first, Juma was hesitant, but Amina was so kind that he found himself opening up to her. They talked about his village, his family, and his dreams. Amina listened as if every word mattered, and she felt happier around him than she had felt in a long time. Things took a turn on the night of the Rosanna Hotel Gala. All three women were there, dressed in glamorous gowns and dripping in jewelry. When Miriam saw Amina chatting with Juma near the flower arrangements, her mood changed. She walked up to them, her expression firm. Amina noticed her approach, but didn't move away. She smiled at Juma, making it clear she wasn't intimidated by Miriam's arrival. Miriam cleared her throat and gave Amina a cold smile. "Funny seeing you here, Amina," she said, her tone icy. "I thought a respectable married woman like you wouldn't be so interested in other men." Amina kept her cool, replying with a smile, "Oh, Miriam, I didn't know friendship was such a crime. Or do you think Juma here isn't good enough to be treated with respect?" Just then, Zara arrived, her sharp eyes taking in the tense scene. She didn't hesitate. "Ladies, maybe you should save your energy. Juma here is probably tired of all this drama. After all, he has better things to do than be the center of attention for you both." But things only got worse from there. Miriam, feeling insulted, grabbed Juma's arm, and Amina grabbed the other, refusing to back down. Zara joined in too, putting her hand on his shoulder. Suddenly, the three billionaire wives were all pulling at Juma, each one refusing to let go. People around them gasped and stared, whispering to one another. Some even started recording the scene on their phones. amused by the unusual spectacle of three wealthy women fighting over a poor gardener. Juma was overwhelmed and tried to pull away, but the women were strong, and they weren't letting him go. Finally, he raised his voice, firm but respectful. "Please, let me go. This isn't my place, and I don't belong in this kind of situation. I'm just a gardener." His words seemed to shock them all. The women let go, staring at him, realizing how out of place he truly felt in their world. For a brief moment, the whole room went quiet as everyone watched Juma walk away, out of the Grand Hotel and back into the night. As he left, the three women were left standing there, watching in silence. The glamour and wealth they usually took so much pride in suddenly felt empty. They had lost something real, not just a game, but a reminder that even the richest lives can feel hollow without true respect and humility. The weeks after that night at the Rosanna Hotel were strangely quiet for Juma. He went back to his usual routine, working in the gardens and avoiding anything that could bring him back into the path of the billionaire wives. But he couldn't stop thinking about them. He wondered how they were dealing with the fallout of their public scene, and part of him felt bad for how it all ended. However, he was also relieved. He didn't belong in their world, and they didn't belong in his. But while Juma tried to move on, the three women hadn't forgotten him. Each one of them dealt with the incident in her own way, and none of them was willing to let go so easily. Miriam felt embarrassed about the whole scene. She was used to being admired, respected, even envied. To think that she had lowered herself to a public fight over a gardener. Yet, she couldn't shake off her feelings for Juma. There was something about his simple life and his honest smile that felt real to her. So, instead of giving up, she decided to approach him carefully. She began visiting the estate where he worked, pretending she was just taking an interest in the gardens. She would watch him from a distance, trying to find a way to reconnect. Zura, on the other hand, was angry at herself for getting involved in a game that didn't go her way. She had always prided herself on being able to win anyone over, yet Juma had walked away without a second thought. She was determined not to let it end like that. If Miriam was also trying to reach him, then Zara had all the more reason to make sure she didn't win. Zara decided to use her connections to track down Juma's background, learn everything about his life, and maybe even offer him something he couldn't refuse. Amina took a quieter approach. She was deeply embarrassed, but also regretful. She had no intention of hurting anyone, especially not Juma, who had shown her nothing but respect and kindness. She understood that he felt uncomfortable around them, and maybe that was her fault too. After thinking it over, Amina decided to apologize to Juma directly. She wanted to explain herself and perhaps make amends. One rainy afternoon, while Juma was pruning the roses at the estate, he saw a familiar figure walking toward him with an umbrella. It was Amina, dressed simply, no expensive jewelry or flashy clothes. She stopped in front of him and offered a small smile. "Juma, I just wanted to talk. Can we?" she asked softly. Juma paused, unsure of what to say, but eventually nodded. He led her to a small wooden bench by the garden, and they sat quietly, listening to the rain. I'm sorry for everything that happened, Amina began, her voice genuine. We acted foolishly, and I shouldn't have let things go that far. I don't want you to think I was toying with you. I truly enjoyed our conversations. Juma looked down, then replied, Thank you for saying that, ma'am. But I'm not sure why all of this happened. I'm just a simple man. I don't belong in your world, and I don't understand why I became part of it. Amina nodded. I understand, and I don't blame you for feeling that way. But sometimes, even in our world, people just need someone real, someone who isn't constantly thinking about money and power. She took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. I know it's too much to ask, but I hope you'll forgive us. Juma looked at her, surprised at her sincerity. He nodded slowly. Thank you, Amina. I forgive you. As Amina left, Juma felt a small sense of closure. He hoped that would be the end of it, but just a few days later, Zara made her move. She arranged to meet Juma in a local cafe, surprising him by showing up unannounced. She handed him an envelope filled with cash, enough money to change his life. Juma stared at it, not knowing what to say. It's not charity, Zara insisted, noticing his hesitation. Think of it as a gift to thank you. You're a good man, Juma. You deserve better than struggling in a village. Use this to help yourself or your family. Just don't think about it too much. Juma shook his head. I appreciate it, ma'am, but I can't accept this. I don't want anything that makes me feel like I owe you something. I'm fine with what I have. Zara was taken aback, shocked that he would reject so much money without a second thought. She left the cafe that day more frustrated than ever. Her pride bruised, but her interest in Juma only deepening. And just when Juma thought he had finally dealt with everything, Miriam made her approach. She invited him to her estate one evening, saying she needed advice on the garden. When he arrived, he realized she had prepared a lavish dinner for just the two of them. The table was decorated with flowers. Candlelight flickered in the soft breeze, and the smell of delicious food filled the air. Juma was uncomfortable, but too polite to refuse. Miriam tried to charm him, asking him questions about his life, his family, his dreams. She laughed at his stories and offered him more food, keeping the atmosphere light and warm. But Juma couldn't shake the feeling that this was wrong. She was a married woman, and he didn't want to be part of something that felt dishonest. Finally, he stood up. I'm sorry, Miriam, but I can't do this. I respect you, but I need to keep my life simple. I can't let myself get involved in anything that would hurt you or anyone else. Miriam's face fell. She tried to hide her disappointment, but Juma could see it. She nodded quietly, understanding that she had pushed too far. As he walked home that night, Juma felt a mix of relief and sadness. He knew he had made the right choice, but he also knew that his life would never be the same. The world of the billionaire wives was close to him now, and he was fine with that. Over time, the women moved on, each learning a lesson from the encounter. Miriam realized that wealth couldn't buy everything, and that sometimes it was best to leave things as they were. Zura learned that not every person could be won over with money and power. And Amina, grateful for Juma's forgiveness, decided to cherish the simple things in her life more than ever before. As for Juma, he went back to his village, his heart lighter. He had experienced a glimpse of a world he'd never imagined, and he'd managed to walk away with his dignity intact. He knew he didn't belong among the wealthy, but he also knew he had something they couldn't buy: self-respect. And that, to him, was worth more than all the money in the world.